Stay tuned to the end of this video for a word to our patrons. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Gosh, I feel like we were just here. But it's been several weeks, and also we'll be here again, eventually. But love is in the air, and the Pope is here to punch it. It's FGO. She probably punches things. Anyway, limited SSR ruler, Johanna, or Johanna, if you're feeling very American. This is Wanted. If it's your first time tuning in, we're going to break down a servant's history, fate lore, mechanics, and more. And, you know, show this video a little love if you do see it. I know that obviously this event has kind of a cursed history. Johanna's kind of the horizon to Tiamat's Breath of the Wild. But, you know, we're working on the video nonetheless. So, the story of Pope Joan, sometimes Popess Johanna or Johannes Angelicus, is a story which is basically a medieval urban legend. Claims that a woman, named Joan or some variation of, was Pope for 2 whole years, usually given as 855 to 857. To spoil our conclusion a little bit, modern historians are pretty sure, all but confirmed this is a myth. And in fact, many people criticized its factuality, you know, as early as like the 15 and 1600s. But it got propagated for quite a while, for multiple hundreds of years, and was widely believed at certain points of history. People would actually, you know, jot down in lists. So yeah, that's where the female pope was. Also, because we like to discuss names, some later tellings of the story place her name as Agnes instead. Joan or Johanna seems to be much more popular. Anyway, our earliest references are to an unnamed female pope from a historian by the name of Jean Perrier of Mailly. It's male, but it's got an ly at the end. Mailly? Anyway, working out of the region of Metz, France. His work is the Chronica Universalis Mettensis. It's supposed to be a historical account of the church in the Metz region. It was written sometime during the 13th century. Dates get, you know, shakier here. But he established the bare-bones tropes of the legend, which are as follows. There was a woman who disguised herself as a man to serve as a church secretary. Through her talents and character, she was raised to the position of cardinal, and then pope. Her disguise was undone when she gives birth in a papal procession, is executed on the spot. There's your 5-minute sound clip. If I knew that a shorts version of this Wanted wouldn't do even worse in views than the full version of this Wanted, that's the bit I would cut out and put in the short. Now, where exactly, like I said, he sourced this, little unknown, but there's a couple possible variations. His version is copied by some later scholars and then embellished on to contain some more common elements. The most detailed version appears in the 3rd edition of Martin of Opava's Chronicon Pontificum et Imperatorum, which is actually related to papal history. This one specifically places the female pope's tenure between Leo IV and Benedict II. It says that the pope's name was given as John Angelus, or John of Mainz. Mainz is a very large city in Germany, which is why, again, the form Johanna is sometimes used. And then, to quote the version written in the Chronicon, the Pope John Angelus ruled for 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. So, very specific numbers used, which is also why we can fact-check and say that definitely the version is printed by these historians never happened. But this has the specific elements that recur later and is the most embellished version of the tale. The female pope was taken to Athens by a lover who disguised her as a man. She studied all manner of subjects, became an unequaled scholar, eventually moved back to Rome. She taught the liberal arts, as in the classical core 7 subjects of education, and eventually, due to the people's high opinion of her, became pope. The pregnancy was due to the result of her unnamed male companion, and she gives birth on what was once the Via Sacra, but then became known as a shunned street where the papal procession doesn't go. I didn't actually write down the street juncture, because Martin's recollection here does say exactly. There is actually a case where papal processions avoided the street named in this section, but almost all of that happened after the 13th century when this story started appearing, so there's no proof that they actually dodged that road. Some other versions of the Chronicon version, sorry, that's a little redundant in my script, basically, when some people repeated the Chronicon's version of events, they claimed that the female pope wasn't executed, but she was confined for penance, and eventually her son went on to become Bishop of Ostia. Usually it's claimed that this female pope, again, name now given as John Angelus, was buried somewhere on the shunned street. Other places claim she was buried at St. Peter's Basilica. And again, I want to point out, I'll say this probably a couple of times, but based on modern historical evidence, and even historical evidence, There's no sign there was actually a gap between Leo IV and Benedict II, especially not one of 2+ years. If they're eyeballing the 2 years, we know better. Now, there are some fragments of manuscripts from the 800s that are used as the basis for the Chronicon. There's a couple of footnotes in these, like actually scribbled on notes, that may mention the feminine form of John, Johanna, but all of the actual accounts of the female pope are after Martin of Opava's writing, after he compiled the Chronicon, so they seem to be parroting his account. There's also another urban legend of the church that Johanna is associated with, the Sedia Stercoraria, which means, unfortunately, the dung chair. But yeah, there's a chair in the Vatican with a hole cut out of the bottom. Its exact purpose is lost to time. It very well could be a chair for shitting, but it also may have been a birthing stool for female imperials back when the Roman Empire existed. But the popular myth is that it exists so that a pope can sit in it, and a visual and even hands-on check can be done to verify his male sex. I would like to reiterate, this is also almost assuredly an urban legend made up by the slightly dirty-minded historians of the Middle Ages. But they were the ones who thought of, oh, it's a chair with a hole in it so you can check. Not me. Anyway, as mentioned, during the 1500s, the Reformation period, historians and religious scholars began to take umbrage with the legend and began to deconstruct and deny it. Pope Clement VIII in 1601 outright declared the legend untrue and is said to have had a bust that was previously assigned to Johanna, labeled Johannes VIII, Femina de Angelia, removed or relabeled. Which is fair also because, again, as we said, there shouldn't be a bust because she wasn't real. The general opinion of Catholic scholars seems to be that Johanna was a satire criticism of one of the Johns. There's a lot of Johns in the popes. John XI was pope in the 900s. He had a very short papacy, died when he was young. His mother, Marozia, was a very influential woman in Rome. She was part of a very influential political dynasty. She was supposed to have been mistress to several previous popes, one of whom was John XI's dad. She was styled as senatrix, very authoritative position. And then John XII was in the latter half of the 900s. He was Marozia's nephew, son of her sister Theodora. He was known as a particularly immoral and lascivious pope who had a lot of mistresses. Historians during the Reformation period suggested that one of these mistresses may have been named Joan and exercised high-level influence on Rome. There is a lot of, post-facto, kind of political commentary from this period where they discuss, women wearing the papal tiara, etc. Both of these Johns do come from a time in Catholic history which is known as the Saeculum Escurum, or more crassly, the pornocracy. This period is from about Sergius III, who was Marozia's lover, to John XII, lasted about 60 years. Marozia and her sister Theodora were members of strong political lineage and did exercise some additional muscle over the office of the papacy. Reports of it being the nadir of the papacy are most likely exaggerated. After all, not every pope from this period should be painted with the same brush. There were definitely a couple of Nepo baby popes in here who did seem to have a little more sex having than is normally allowed in the papacy. There's an OSP video on this if you want to know more. Drink. But the fact that there was some of this, oh no, there might be women influencing the papacy, could have been that this was started as a dig against them. Though why then we assigned the time period wrongly, who knows? Protestant authors during this time period seem to really like the story of Pope Joan because it let them thumb their nose at the Catholic Church, which is always valid. But this is also probably another point against her historicity. If there was actually, a widely acknowledged story of a female pope at the time, the enemies of the Vatican probably would have brought it up. Somebody would remember this for the gossip column earlier. Now, there is some zones where modern historians, have claimed that there could have been a female pope, probably sometime during the 1000s. This was a period when there were a lot of anti-popes. Basically, how the anti-pope thing works is it's when a guy says to the pope, hey, you're the Bishop of Rome, I am. This isn't really backed up by historical evidence. It's just giving people a strike zone that, well, there could have been a double fake pope who was a woman disguised as a man, but we just don't know. Also, Joan or Johanna may have been, or John Angus, I could say, may have been made up to account for the fact that there were several errors numbering the Johns, because the church has been around so long, and also there have been 23 popes who took the papal name John, or Johannes. So sometimes they just haven't been counted correctly. So this may lead to errors where people counted the same guy twice, or skipped a number, and thus made up an extra John who was fake to fill in the gaps. Now, to end on one of my favorite subjects, in the original Tarot de Marseille, which is where the occult use of the playing cards began, Major Arcana number 2 was known as La Popess. More conventionally these days, it's called the High Priestess, but the original version in Terre de Marseille showed a woman wearing a papal tiara. This was widely connected with the myth of Pope Joan, though obviously there's a few other legends and allegories that it could go through. The version depicted in the Rider-Waite deck is much more occult and pagan-leaning, but the High Priestess / La Popess is supposed to be the female opposite of the Hierophant, who is obviously Le Pope, much like how the Emperor and Empress work. The symbolism of the High Priestess is as follows. To quote Waite, when the illustrated guide came out, secrets, mystery, the future as yet unrevealed. The woman who interests the querent, if male, the querent herself, if female. Silence, tenacity, mystery, wisdom, science. Yes, he said mystery twice. If reversed, passion, moral or physical ardor, conceit, surface knowledge. And as a general statement, despite her obviously mythic status, Pope Joan is pretty popular in fiction, been the subject of many stories and illusions over the years. Now, on the lore side, we'll have a brief moment here. So, this is fate. Obviously, being a myth is no stopper to being a servant. There are also, obviously, a matter of debate on being fictional among servants. It's a, actual point of discussion with characters such as Holmes and Moriarty, but many mythological heroes come from periods where the rules of the earth were a lot shakier, even if they have now faded to myth. Johanna's hidden attribute is correctly earth, for instance. But the possibility, in some cases, ardent belief that she might have been real in some form gives her a strong spirit origin, even if she knows she's not been acknowledged by history. Being summoned as a servant, you have approximation of modern knowledge, so she knows, is a little nettled. Now, being a female pope, Johanna's a great fit for ruler. She is holy. She should have no strong desire for the holy grail normally, and thanks to the myths about her, she has all of the qualities of a saint, even if she isn't one. Presumably, there's going to be an audio call about rulers later, so we can get even more background on the class, but that's what we're working with right now. But since she's an FGO first character and just a good fit for heroic spirit all around, I don't really have much to add here. The lore is just, servant. Johanna is a major character in Lost Belt Chapter 6.5, Traum, which also deals with Holmes and Moriarty, I'm realizing. There she leads the Reinstatement realm along with Constantinos 11. It's her first appearance, predating her banner by quite a bit, so this is our major introduction to her character themes and abilities, so if you want to know more, play Traum. And obviously she's going to be a headlining character in the upcoming Valentine's event, titled, and I quote, Johanna and the Unidentified Love, Smash 'em Up, Love, Lovers, and the Great Stone Statue, end quote. Also, like I said, there's probably a ruler-focused audio call coming, unless we're getting bamboozled again, so she may reappear in that. Anyway. Mechanics. Johanna is a 5-star ruler. She's got a heavier emphasis on HP than attack. This goes a long way with ruler class resistances. She is QQAAB. Average hit against an NP game, pretty normal stuff. Her NP is an AoE arts, and it's pretty solid. She gets a self buff for 50% damage up versus evil for 1 turn first. It inflicts 1 time 3 turns buff block on all enemies. The overcharge effect is bonus damage versus the human attribute. So that's 2 special damages, and obviously even at 1-3, buff block is a great effect to have on an AoE NP. Just stick everybody with the buff block. It can be very handy for certain kinds of challenges. Her first skill grants a targeted ally a huge buff to Star Absorb on arts, and a 5100% crit up on arts for 3 turns, and also puts 5 to 10 stars on herself per turn for 3 turns. Pretty big buff, though, obviously, for a first skill. Requires a little bit of work to set up. Her second skill is a 20% arts up and a 500 to 1000 damage cut for the team for 3. That's right, no uses there. That's just 1k damage cut for 3 turns, and is a 1-time 3 turns debuff immune for the whole team. It is also her 20 to 30% battery. Her final skill is a party-wide NP gauge per turn of 10 to 20% for 3 turns, and also a charisma, so it's 10 to 20% attack up for 3 turns, though the cooldown is long. Her passive skills are just Magic Resistance EX for big debuff resistance and a Territory Creation A, so her arts cards hit a little harder. Now, Johanna occupies a fun little slot as an off DPS, I would say. She's a ruler with an HP focus, but she's going to deal neutral damage to most classes because she's a ruler. But with her NP on its own, she's not going to be a superb killer. But you do have 2 special damages. She's got the damage plus buff, and then also extra multi, basically. The damage multiplier is augmented versus the human attribute, both of which are pretty common. She should compensate to deal decent damage without more generalized steroids, though obviously she does have the smaller form in a team-wide arts and attack buff. And her buff block is great to deal with annoying fights. and belies what you would normally think of as, tucking her in as a farmer for, berserkers maybe, or the rare cases where you get a node with moon cancers. Her battery may be minimal on its own, but her NP over time will help her and others loop by just giving them free NP every turn. 20% every turn covers a multitude of sins. So basically, to sum that up, you got 2 uses. You can use Johanna as a sweeper for ruler if you're fighting the right enemies. All her buffs plus the standard support suite should get you sufficient damage. Obviously, she's not going to be doing, wave clearing damage probably without supporters, but, you can cover with a multitude of sins, like we said. Where she's really going to excel is, I would say, story content and challenging fights. Challenge quests, certain weird, bonus quests, stuff like that. Main story nodes. Because she's got a 1k damage cut, she's got a one-time debuff immune, she regenerates NP like crazy for that sweet art stall, and for follow-up turns, her art crits focus is crazy good. 3 turns of double damage with star weight on arts. Woo! Obviously, she has the cards for you to use that on herself, but you can also use that to just turbocharge any DPS arts critter. And she even generates a few stars that way with a passive, which is important because, remember, arts has basically no star gen normally. Now, for team comp, that means you can take it a couple ways. If you're going to stall, Jean and Tommo are classics for a reason. Hard defenses, healing, NP damage up on Tommo, and she has that little minus cooldown that Johanna wants. Like I said, Johanna's cooldowns are long. And Jean gives you, hard defenses and more stall tactic with stuns and the like. Castoria, I would say, occupies kind of a flex slot here. She can be really good for stalling, but also 1 or 2 will just turbocharge you for farming with those big NP gains and arts up, and also adds another trait damage, though finding mobs with threat to humanity is pretty rare. But for boss fights, stoling it out. Lady Avalon is also great with her big arts and crit buff for 1 turn to really focus on a DPSer, but also her ability to add plus overcharge to the mix can be very handy. That would give Johanna more of her special human damage. Casgil is also a classic supporter of the arts because not only does he do a variety of team-wide buffs that are good, one of those team-wide buffs is he gets to turbo out star gen to allow really, really big crits. If you're using Johanna to snipe ads and deep of an enemy for a more focused hitter, you can't go wrong with single targets like Saber Lancelot, single target mode Melusine, and fellow rulers. Even some budget units like Izo. He's got, single target arts, self-crit up kind of a thing. Wide variety of fun little guys. And obviously, if you're going for more generalized art stuff, there are also budgets there, like Paracelsus. For CEs, I would say this one is tricky. Obviously, major NP boosting CEs like Black Grail or Heaven's Feel or their equivalents are very desirable for pure farming turbo, and obviously can't be too bad in a DPS race against a boss. Certainly, Johanna has the high HP pool to afford padding with a Black Grail. But since she has only like a 30% battery on her own, I feel like the 50% charge CEs I can only recommend if you have specific support comps. Now, obviously, since you're going to want to get her battery up to get your arts up, that is your team-wide arts as well, so like you're probably going to want to steroid and battery at the same time. You can mitigate with append skills in this case, and if you're, truly going for a stall, consider defensive or damage-reducing CEs. There are a couple of those out there. And, if she's just playing the support role, you can even plop, Ideal Holy King in there. Nobody can say more to max HP, right? I will say also her Bond CE can be very fun as well. It's a team-wide 15% damage against both human and evil for the whole squad, so can save that for certain boss fights you're hunting. And the event she's going to launch with has a 50% battery CE, which gives a further 25% damage versus human when MLB'd. That's the point CE. So if you are trying to turn her into pocket DPS, that can be a very funny focus. But again, the numbers are going to be awkward. You're going to have to come up with a 20% charger up from somewhere. A single Lady Avalon can do it. You can do it with 1 Castoria and then save the rest of her batteries for a loop follow-up. But still, it's, the numbers, Mason. Now to round out with the other stuff for mats. Johanna is a ruler, so while that means that she only takes statues to ascend, she needs 5 of every type. And skills are going to be similar. She needs 5 of every type of gem spread out throughout her skills. And also to cap it off, you're going to need 12 Spiritrons and 15 eggs per skill. So a little high value. Now, to talk about her rarity, we do like to talk about the banner rarity. She's an SSR, so you want banners? We got banners. Obviously, she's going to debut at Valentine's this year. Next year, there's going to be a pre-release campaign for the Valentine's event that year that she will appear in. Also, she's already been in the weekly ruler campaign banner, just happened in JP. That'll be 2 years from now for the English world. And also, they're going to do their Valentine's event again soon, and I suspect that she'll be in there somewhere because they love to do that trick. And we have already seen that they are not afraid to double up on these weekly campaign banners and then also put a normal banner in. Like, the second weekly Saber banner had Saber Medusa in it, and then, like, at the back half of January, they've started another Saber Medusa banner for the Year of the Snake event they're running. So, there's a lot going on there. And obviously, as a limited SSR, expect that she will be on all GSSRs somewhere in the foreseeable future if you want to hit up them ruler zones. And yes, I know, we're all anticipating in late March, or mid-March probably, for the pre-release, but Lilum Harlot, you know, we're all looking forward to that T-Mat and Draco, but you never know what you're going to roll. And this is what I got. So the video ends. Everyone, I tell you to go with God and enjoy your chocolates. I must get back to the grindstone. So be sure to do all the video interacty things. Like the video, leave your comments, subscribe, ring the bell, share it with your friends, share it with random people to try and get them to play FGO. Studio Make is not responsible for anybody who randomly receives this video. You can check out our Discord if you want to check out our rolling thread among many, many other funny haha features. And of course, I also have to say that you can support this channel by joining our channel memberships and by supporting us on Patreon, where you could have got this episode early. I'll have a shout out for our patrons right after a musical outro. And before we go, I want to thank all of our patrons who help make these videos possible, but especially Adam DeHarp, Blacklist OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JDV9000, Chris Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Charvor, some guy named Bob, and Varian the Crow. If you like what you do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon for access to episodes early and more.